Hello. I'm going to talk about using plants as medicine, but I don't even like to call it medicine or pinning them down as teachers or whatever else, because I think it's important to understand that a plant is another being that you form a relationship with when you're using it medicinally or however, or as a even a teaching presence in your life. So I think there's a lot of facets to this whole relationship aspect of working with plants, and um, there's a lot to unpack here, as they say. I think a lot of people might benefit, at least I have, from understanding their health, well-being, their physical health, their mental health, from their own perspective, from a understanding themselves more directly. And it's completely acceptable and often important to take a doctor's point of view into consideration. But I think it's also very important to try to understand what's going on with your body and your health on your own, and not always rely on a doctor to tell you what's best for your health. They're an incredible resource. Of course, we need doctors. We need people who are experts in certain fields and in certain areas to help us with our health, to help us with things we might not understand, who have devoted more time and energy into that. But in my experience, I think too many people they're almost intimidated, I guess. They think that, oh, this isn't my place. It's not my place to understand how my body works. That's what the doctors are for, and I'm no expert. So how could I possibly understand how my body works and what it means to be healthy, or what to use in order to remedy a certain health complication or to achieve a certain state of health? So I think that's not the right attitude. Um, you have a body, and you have a mind, and you have an ability to understand information, and we live in the internet age where there's abundant sources of information out there. Yes, some of them may or may not be the most trustworthy, but I think a discerning person can go about understanding what's a good source to trust, or just trusting their experience and their using their own mind to tease out what might not be the most accurate, or using sources that they deem acceptable, that they deem reputable or scholarly or whatever, or most importantly, cross-checking sources. So if one source of information says something or another about a plant or a molecule or whatever, checking it with another source, and on top of that, reading experience reports, reading what happened to others when they used a similar plant or medicine, either just to explore it, just to understand the being at face value, or to address a specific health condition that they have. Um, because there's a lot of information out there about anything. So I could go down a list of a lot of different plants and um, molecules, drugs, whatever you want to call them, that I've used for different reasons over time and developed a direct relationship with, meaning that I've grown them. We have a friend over here. Um, so I think when you start growing your plants, especially from seed, and it doesn't always have to be from seed. You can get a cutting from many different places online, or if you go out and find them in nature, that's often the best way. If you can go out and find a plant that you're interested in nature, and observe its natural environment, then you can learn a lot more about it. Or maybe you can just get a cutting from a neighbor or something like that. So I think it's going to be an increasingly important path for people in light of certain current events where things are changing. I see, if we project this stuff further, more and more people growing their own food, more and more people maybe having some chickens in the backyard, or whatever, having more of a homesteading type of approach to their interaction with nature and their interaction with life, because it just ends up being a little bit healthier in the end, I think, or not even healthier, just more enjoyable, because you understand what you're getting yourself into. And I'll bring this right into, because where people like to go with self-medicating or whatever. This was a term I used to hear a lot when I was younger, and adults would try to tell us about using drugs or whatever. They would say someone was self-medicating if they're using marijuana, and I hate that word, cannabis, please. If someone was smoking cannabis, they would call it self-medicating or using whatever drugs. I mean, okay, I can understand the worry about something like self-medicating when you're talking about teenagers or some young person who hasn't really done any sort of research or homework on it. And research, that's another word that's gotten weird these days, because everyone wants to insult people who said they've done research about something, specifically conspiracy theories or something like that. But use the internet as a resource to do research upon things. It's important. And decide for yourself whether you have a good source, or just consider it. Just consider the source of information that you're getting. Where it's coming from. So back to the self-medicating thing. I don't understand why an adult, someone who is a fully grown individual who can make their own choices, shouldn't be allowed to self-medicate in some way. We do this anyway. This is widely accepted when it comes to vitamins and minerals, right? Or herbal supplements. But there's certain ones that aren't accepted nearly as much, or certain territories that are frowned upon a bit more, for a whole number of reasons that I'm not going to say are either legitimate or non-legitimate. I think there's just better ways of going about them, and there's certain roots to these problems. I'll take a very common and popularly used substance like alcohol and use that as an example right now. Alcohol can be something that can be used in a medicinal capacity, right? So whiskey, if you have a cold or you have a sore throat or something, whiskey is a pretty good remedy for that. Been used for something like that for a while. Alcohol in general might be able to help something like that. Some people might say it would lower your immune system. Yeah, if you drink like an entire 750 of Jack Daniels, or or whiskey or whatever, you're going to feel sick, But if you just drink a little bit of it, it might help you. And this comes wrapped up with a whole bunch of other stuff in there. So if we think about what I said before about going back to a sort of approach where more people are growing their own food, they're making their own food, they're making their own beer, they're making their own wine, whatever. When you have a direct relationship with whatever it is that you're using as medicine, growing a plant or fermenting your own beer, you have a different understanding about it first and foremost, and you have a different relationship to it. So if you make a few gallons of whiskey because you fermented the grain and you distilled it and you went through that whole process of what it takes to make whiskey, you know the work that went into making it, and you respect it more. So you're a lot less likely to become an alcoholic because you understand how much work it takes. It's not just going down to the store and buying a handle anymore. Now you're like, if you want that whiskey, you have to create it, and that's a lot harder. And you're not going to be so quick to drink the whole thing if you make it. Also, your stash is then controlled inherently. So if you have to grow your own cannabis and you grow an ounce, you're not going to be smoking a gram a day because you understand that that's all you have until you grow more. You know? So this is part of the importance of using anything medicinally, of not only doing research about it and understanding how it's affecting your body, of understanding how much you can use, of regulating the dosage, because often the difference between medicine and poison is the dosage. This is another commonly heard thing, at least for me. And so in the context of this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about a plant that I've had an interesting relationship with. I wanted to do another video about it, which I might, just to go into some deeper details about my experiences with this plant, or this family of plants rather. What I have here is a deadly nightshade called Brugmansia, and this is just a cutting. It's also known as tree datura, or angel trumpets. And I've had a number of experiences with deadly nightshades. Normally, just regular datura inoxa, that's found in New Jersey. And the reason I just started reading about it one day. I had been interested in it for more lucid dreaming and for breathing, because I saw an article a few years ago written by a fellow alchemist that explains what happens when you smoke datura, and that it can be good for breathing. And so I haven't had any medical insurance for about 3 years now, and so I used to use an inhaler for asthma if I were to ever wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to breathe, which is something that happens to me pretty regularly. I've used essential oils like menthol, eucalyptus, wintergreen, some kind of mint oil that opens up the air passageways in recent years, but sometimes that doesn't work as well, or like a Vicks vapor rub or something. But I've had success with smoking the datura, and as well as smoking mullein. Mullein helps, but it's a little bit different. Does a little bit different things. But smoking the datura has helped me with breathing, with I wouldn't call them asthma attacks because that sounds very dramatic, but when my lungs close up and I'm really having trouble breathing in the middle of the night, which can happen to me pretty often, especially during the change of seasons. If I have any part of the datura plant, usually preferably leaves or flowers, I like, because they're just a little bit lighter. Like, who wants to smoke stems of anything? It burns hot and it hurts, and it just doesn't taste as good. I don't know. But leaves and flowers are just what I prefer. But smoking them, it helps my lungs. I feel the air passageways open, and I can breathe again. So this is a thing where it's like, typically most people would say to you, "What do you mean you're smoking something and it's helping you breathe? That's crazy." It's like, no, it's not when it works. You know, when I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't breathe, and I smoke this thing, and then I can breathe, like, who is anyone to tell me that smoking something's not going to help me in some way? Okay, I'm sorry, not sorry. So here are some dried Brugmansia trumpets. They're pretty, and I've never hadn't encountered a Brugmansia in my waking living life until recently. Actually, my friend started growing one in New Jersey, and they're beautiful flowers, and they have a different quality about them to the Datura too. Here's one of the purple Datura Matels. This one's a little bit more. The color didn't dry as nicely, but the angel trumpets, they come down, and the devil's trumpets, the Datura, they go up, and they're chemically, they have very similar things in them. It's also said that the alkaloid content differs throughout the day with these plants. So if you pick them at night, right before sunset or right around sunset, it might be a little bit different than if you were to pick them at another time. And you are to be very, very careful with them, because if you're ingesting them orally, like, it can get real scary real fast, and you don't. It's the way I've always put it is, if you take enough Datura to be absolutely sure that you are feeling the effects of the Datura, you're not going to be happy about it. Like, you're not going to have a good time. Maybe some people would, but it's rather uncomfortable. What happens when you take a stiff dose of any deadly nightshade is you can't see. You begin to dial in a frequency, a reality that is completely out of phase with this one. You're in the underworld, basically. It makes other hallucinogens pale in comparison in some way. And it's not really a hallucinogen, it's a deliriant. It's like with most classical psychedelics, you're still there. Your thinking capacity is still there in many ways. Like, you might, like, on a real high dose, you might kind of check out, but most of the time, you took something, even if you forgot you took something. Like, if someone reminded you, hey, you just ate a whole lot of mushrooms, you'd be like, oh yeah, I did. With Datura, it's not like that. Like, you'll just, like, you might remember that you took it, but then you'll forget again, and then you might take more. That's a classic thing with eating the Datura. It's something to be very careful with high doses, and that's the other thing that's dangerous about them, why people are scared of these sorts of plants, especially ingesting them, is because of the alkaloid content changing throughout the day, and, like, you don't know how strong a flower or a leaf is going to be when you pick it. So this is why you never want to eat a whole flower or something. Smoking it, though, is safer, because which is one of the reasons I came back to. Now I'm just getting into my whole other video that I planned in this one, but I'll leave some of those parts out for another video where I'll go more in depth into some of this. But I'm just going to go into the self-medicating aspects of using the deadly nightshades right now. But I still want to have the warnings going on, because I don't want anyone to actually get into this stuff without being prepared. Because the other disclaimer here is I had been working with plants, and I'd already developed a very acute sense of understanding what a plant or drug is doing to my consciousness before I got anywhere close to working with the deadly nightshades like this. So I wouldn't unless you're pretty experienced with working with plants directly and understanding what they're doing to your mind, body, soul, experience. I wouldn't recommend going right into the deadly nightshades, because there's something else. Um, they also sort of come to you. That's the thing. That's one of the. I'll go into that more depth in another video. But the, if it's if it's not kind of presenting itself to you in one way or another, that's pretty direct. I wouldn't mess around with it. And the every time that I decided to start working with the deadly nightshades, in any way or another, it came to me, and I'll explain that, this how I knew that this plant was sort of asking me um, to to understand it a little bit and to work with it, to get to know it. um, I'll explain how I knew that more, how I came to determine that in another video. So the I guess I could save the whole thing for the other video, but I'm just gonna go into the chemistry aspects of how I've come to understand what it's doing for me and how to use it properly and all of that. Because the first time I used Datura, it was almost purely recreationally. It was not recreationally, but like exploratory. Like I just wanted to. I never really did this stuff in a recreational capacity. I mean, I did, but it was more. It's more the exploration is a recreation for me. So it's not like I'm just partying or having fun. Like what I enjoy is understanding the plants. Understanding the relationship they all have, and kind of mapping out the consciousness. So like if this plant does one thing, this molecule does one thing, this plant does one thing, and then I understand deeper aspects of myself through understanding all of these things and integrating these perspectives into one whole. So uh, even the first time it came to me, I'll get into that later. Um, but and it's not like a person came to me with it either. Um, so the second time it was for lucid dreaming. When it started, some people that I was learning from started presenting Datura again, and I thought of it as a tool for lucid dreaming because I was advised to by two different people to smoke it, and to smoke it at night before bed, to have more clear dreams, to understand what's going on in the dream world, which is in many ways is that underworld that I was talking about when you go into a very deep Datura experience. So I decided to start reading about them more recently. So I was reading about the chemistry, about the tropane alkaloids that are contained within them. The atropine, the daturine, scopolamine. Those are the three main ones. And atropine is both. It's chiral, so it has two enantiomers. So one enantiomer may be in the Datura, that's not in the Brugmansia, that's in the Belladonna, that's not in the whatever. But those are the three that I've come across, at least as far as understanding the tropane aspect of the chemistry of the experience and what those do. But atropine is used medically by pharmaceuticals, and it's prescribed for a number of things. And so I'm sure other people out there have had sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is when you wake up in the middle of the night, you can't move, and you feel there is a demon presence in the room, seeing red eyes, or something that is some kind of dark, shadowy figure that is present in the room. You wake up absolutely terrified and physically frozen. It's not a pleasant experience. It's something that has happened to me a number of times. But I've also had something that was almost a little bit more terrifying to me, which was something almost in between sleepwalking and sleep paralysis, where I did not get up out of the bed and start going to the kitchen and making myself a grilled cheese in the middle of the night without knowing. What would happen is I would get up and start moving around involuntarily. A lot of times I wouldn't remember. A lot of times someone sleeping next to me would tell me what was going on, saying that I woke up and started voguing or something in the middle of the bed. And there have been times that I would wake up and witness this happening to my body and have no control over it. So my body would be contorting and moving around in all sorts of ways that were very scary to me and that I wasn't in control of, and I was not happy about it. So it almost feels like sleep paralysis, but it feels like something is controlling your body, like you're a video game character or some shit. Beyond that, when I started reading about what atropine is used to treat in a medical context, one of the things I read about was something called extrapyramidal symptoms, which had a whole bunch of these like kinetic neuromuscular motor malfunctions or disorders going on in the body, where like either involuntary muscle contractions, which the sleeping thing would fall under, where my muscles are contracting and I'm having all these movements happening to my body that are not voluntary, which is not cool. Muscle spasms, which I would experience during the day, like my leg having a muscle spasm, or my back, or just feeling my muscles like vibrating in weird little points. Making weird faces, which is something that I do both voluntary but if I think about it, sometimes I'm not so much in control of the faces that I'm making during the day, which was tardive dyskinesia or bradykinesia, just being feeling very sluggish and slow, not wanting to get up. And the one I related to the most was the akathisia, where just a motivation to kind of be fidgety, to be maybe bouncing the leg up and down while you're sitting on a chair, or the one that I really related to was wanting to get up and walk around while sitting down and trying to do something, and while getting up and walking around, feeling very uncomfortable and wanting to sit down. And I was like, whoa, that's me. But so I'm not saying there can be very extreme expressions of any of those motor disorders. I don't really experience the most extreme end of any of them, but it's definitely something I can relate to. And what the atropine acts on is the parasympathetic nervous system and these neuromuscular functions. So it can be very physically sedative while not being mentally sedative, which is nice for someone who's experiencing like that these involuntary motor movements, or just a general unrest physically, where if I want to sit down and do a task, and my body constantly wants to move when I sit down, it makes it very difficult to just sit down and read a book, to sit down and focus on one thing or another. So I decided to start. I'd been afraid of even microdosing the datura or any of the deadly nightshades for a long time. I was just smoking them, because when you smoke them, the tropane alkaloids are destroyed by the fire. Certain chemicals break down at certain temperatures, so they're not going to be active anymore. So I was like, okay, because I'd had some pretty scary experiences in the past with the orally ingesting the datura, which has scopolamine, daturine, atropine, whatever. But those are all the tropanes that are going to be destroyed by the fire when you smoke them, and they're anticholinergics. So what they do is they affect acetylcholine in the brain, and they kind of suffocate you when you take them when you take them orally, because it's very drying. So there's a complicated energetic sort of thing that's going on there. with constitution in the body. So some people may benefit from that, other people may not. And I'll go into more about that in a different context. I'm just trying not to lose my thread here about where I was going with the other ones. So when you smoke the tropane alkaloids, they get destroyed and end up dilating your diaphragm in some way. I don't know how, but I experience it. Like when I smoke it, my lungs open up and I can breathe more. That brings more oxygen into the brain, therefore producing more acetylcholine. So somehow when you smoke these plants, it reverses that effect of blocking the acetylcholine and gets more oxygen into the brain. Okay, so upon reading about what the atropine is used for medically, I was like, let me try to microdose again. I had a bag of datura stems because I collect plants. Even if when I wasn't using them, I just had them there. And so I started putting small bits of stem into my tea. Now here's the other thing. You have to understand how the plants work if you're going to do this. I know that the stems are stronger than the leaves and are stronger than the flowers. So you have to do your homework if you're going to work with these things and not just arbitrarily do things. You can do that, but you'll learn the hard way. By putting a little bit of stem in my tea on the daily, I started to feel these effects where the nervous tension in my body wasn't there as much. I noticed I was able to just sit at the table and read articles, read my books, do whatever it is I wanted to do in a sedentary fashion without feeling like I had to get up all the time just because my body wanted to. Or the other thing it helps with is a urinary retention, where because it's drying in some way, and it eases that nervous tension in the body where it's like feeling like you have to constantly go to the bathroom or something. But this is where it's like you also don't want to rely on any of these medicines for these effects. It's the same thing as like getting used to an opiate, right? Where it's like you get used to an opiate or an alcohol to ease the tension in your body and to help you accomplish certain things, or even Adderall. You get used to Adderall to do your homework, to be focused and sit down and complete a task, then all of a sudden you need it for that. So what the important thing to remember when you're working with a plant like this is that it's teaching you a perspective. It's showing you a way that your body is capable of working with or without it. So if you use this plant to feel a certain way, to experience